commercial or family cases that have been mishandled because of political pressure. So if you didn't allow the judgments to be enforced, you would be harming a lot of people who had perfectly legitimate reasons. So I consider that Britain should continue to recognise them and should continue as long as it's reasonably possible to do so. It's a very extreme step to take away enforcement of judgments.
Okay, other questions? Yes, please.
After the year 2020, the launch of the national security law, and there seems to be two legal foundations in Hong Kong. The one is the basic law. The second is the national security law. Somebody just like me, a general citizen, we find the Hong Kong government, the operation is when the rule number 1 and rule number 2 had contradictions, they will follow the number 2 to proceed. This is our general citizen point of view, but from our professional legal person point of view from your side, will you agree? Now the Hong Kong government is doing the operation like this.
Well, I've set out my view in the talk I've given, and you know, you can paraphrase it in whatever way you want. The gist of my
yeah. I think yeah.
What I mean, the gist of what I've said is that there are important provisions in the national security law which are not consistent with the basic law. That's really, you know, the point of what I've been saying today and been saying for several years previously. I'm not sure whether it's particularly helpful to talk about two different legal systems. Of course, the national security law is a mainland law. It's not. It is a law that's been imposed on Hong Kong. It's not a law passed by the Hong Kong Legislative Council. But then the basic law is also a mainland law. So I understand what you're trying to say, but I don't really think that it gets us any further to think of it in those terms.
Why I ask this question? Because if this internal conflict between these two legal foundations is really exists, and the government follow the rule number 2 override the rule number 1 in the real operation, then the rule of law will not be. It is not the real. It is not the.
I think you are legitimate to reconstruct the point in your way. But I think Paul has already tackled the question already. Okay, yes, please.
Hi. Sorry. You mentioned about that you believe in one country, two system. So do you still believe that one country, two system can actually work and apply to nations that have a completely different or opposing legal system, such as Hong Kong and China? Thank you.
Yes, I do. I did work reasonably well from 1997 to 2019, 2020, much against everyone's predictions. I was there. I was chairing Human Rights Monitor in 1997, and many people said to me, "This will never last. This is just a little fig leaf so that Britain can leave and look respectable." And 6 months on, all of the promises will have been broken and everything will be gone. And I didn't think that, and it was completely wrong. Even now, after all the recent problems, there are still many parts of the Hong Kong system that are working quite differently from the mainland system. I just mentioned commercial and family law in answer to the other question, and one can give many other examples. So I do think so, and I think the idea of one country, two systems is a very constructive idea. There are other examples around the world. There used to be a professor at Hong Kong University, long retired now, Professor Yash Gai, who made this his special subject. And the first time it was done was actually in Finland, over 100 years ago now, because there are islands off the coast of Finland where the people are Swedish, they speak a different language, but they were part of Finland how to make the system work. And it was done by giving them their own system that was different. And it's been done in other places. And indeed, you could say the United Kingdom is an example of one country in at least 3 systems. Because Scotland and Northern Ireland have different legal systems. And, you know, yes, it can work. And I believe it could work properly again in Hong Kong if the will was there.
Yeah.
Firstly, thank you for coming to speak to us. It's an honour. As an aspiring barrister myself, I've noticed quite a large disparity between what we can enact with domestic laws compared to those of international laws. In the West, we have the ECHR, our conventions and acts, our Supreme Court, etc. My question is, why is there such a large disparity between what international law or legal bodies proclaim they can do and what they can actually do in terms of the protection of liberties in more authoritarian regimes?
Wow, you've really given me something to think about there. Some international treaties are what's called aspirational. That means they're goals rather than things that you're going to enforce immediately. Are you a student of international law?
Right now, I'm a student of politics and law.
Right. Well, you've heard of the International Covenant on Social and Political Rights. That is sometimes regarded, some of the rights in that are regarded as aspirational rights that relate to giving people a decent standard of living and so on. In some parts of the world, in relation to some rights, a separate system of law has developed. But that depends on countries agreeing to abide by the judgments of those of, say, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which, you know, if you're a Latin American, you can take a case to that court and get a judgment. In Europe, the European Convention on Human Rights, most European countries, including the United Kingdom, you can take a case to the European Court of Human Rights and say, the European Convention, which is an international treaty, has not been followed. But of course, if a country won't agree to that, there's not very much its citizens can do. And in Asia, very few countries have gone down the road of agreeing to international jurisdiction. So that is the reason, really, why there is a big discrepancy in some of those countries. In the United Kingdom, there is not a discrepancy. The European Convention on Human Rights is part of United Kingdom domestic law under the Human Rights Act. And so people can and do every day in court say, this decision is wrong because it breaches this article of the European Convention on Human Rights. So it really depends which country you're in.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. There are different views on the withdrawal of judges from the Court of Final Appeal. So supporters would say that it would be an effective way to discredit the enforcement of the national security law and the Hong Kong judiciary. And I would like, would you be able to elaborate a bit more on overseas judges staying at the final appeal court? Thank you.
Yes, glad to do so. I'm a very strong supporter of them staying. I've obviously discussed this with a whole range of different people, and I think one of the most telling comments that was made to me was in the context of two people I was defending at one time who were charged under the national security law, and someone said to me, your clients who are awaiting trial under that law, you can guarantee that they want the international judges to stay. Because they do stand for certain standards in judicial fairness and judicial decision making. I think if they go, what will replace them? Nothing. The court system will just be weakened. And who will benefit? People who don't want Hong Kong to have a common law system at all. People who would be happy if it just had a system like the mainland. So I think strongly they should stay. I think it's really a mistake to think that withdrawing them would somehow be making some kind of worthwhile gesture. It wouldn't. It would just be an empty gesture, in my view.
Thank you. Yes, further questions? Yes, please. Yes.
I'm just ask, do you think there's any repercussions for barristers, like local barristers in Hong Kong, who represent defendants being prosecuted under the national laws and whatnot, for them to, for example, would they have repercussions on career-wise? Would they be kind of stigmatized or labeled because they defend defending in political cases?
Difficult for me to answer. It's nearly 3 years now since I've been out of Hong Kong, and so I'm not up to date on the atmosphere. I'm not aware of any examples of barristers being stigmatized in that way. Certainly I've seen nothing in the media. I think I would probably have heard if there were any really noteworthy cases. I'm not aware of it happening. It is obviously something that might happen, but so far I've not picked it up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Any? Yes.
Thank you, Paul, for your talk. I have a question about the Hong Kong Bar Association. Just out of ignorance and curiosity, have there been members who are inclined towards the blue camp, let's say, or members who work at the DOJ, or indeed members who serve as judge? Are they members of the Bar Association and have in any way made any influence, their views, make any influence on the decision or actions taken by the bar?
Well, that's really an interesting question. How blue do you have to be to be in the blue camp?
People are inclined towards that.
Is your shirt symbolic?
That's definitely.
A few years back, the chair of the bar was Winnie Tan, who was I have a lot of respect for her, but she's been outspoken very often more on the blue side. So it is not the case that the bar has been completely dominated by the yellow camp. And I was very anxious when I was chairman to involve people in the blue camp, people who I would regard as, if I can put it this way, the respectable blue camp. People who...
You make discrimination.
Well, people who believe in the rule of law, as I understand it, that there should be fair trials, that things should be done in a fair way. And there are some excellent people who politically tend to be more blue, but who do genuinely hold those views. And I tried quite hard to involve some of those individuals, and some of them I did succeed. That was very much my policy as chairman, because I took the view that I represented all barristers.
But have their views affected the council's decision?
Well, I didn't ask the political views of every one of the 25 members. Some of them were, had spoken publicly and were identified with the yellow camp. There was a very bitterly contested election in 2018 for chairmanship of the bar between Philip Blanks and Paul Lamb. And I think when I took over, quite a lot of the people had been elected on Philip Dykes' slate with him. But I was particularly concerned in connection with this Greater Bay Area work that I mentioned, that I should involve people who tended to be with the blue camp, because they were the people who spoke Mandarin, had made contacts, had relevant expertise, it was sensible to use them. And in that area, I don't know what's happened since I left, but I would expect my successor, Victor Dawes, to have carried on in a very similar way. And I would expect that the bar's involvement there is being done by people who are either non-political completely, or who, if they're political, are identified with the Blue Camp. So I think the answer to your question is yes, people from the Blue Camp have sometimes had input into
Probably
the
more
bar.
so after you left.
Well, I can't say. That I really can't say.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
Yes, please.
很抱歉，我只能用中文啊。我是从大陆到了香港，然后从香港到了英国，在这边。刚才这个会长所提的问题里面啊，有两点是这样。
你用一句话问好吗？不然的话怎么翻译了？
我刚才只是这样，就是对于中国政府的认识里边的话，我认为，因为我在这个这个前面4年时间我都在香港，也听了很多的民主派人士的这个会场，可能在会场里面我是唯一一个大陆这样来跟所有人不认识，我只是见过的一些。
比较浓缩一点好不好？
那在这个里面，就是一个问题，对中国的认识里面的话，它是一个专制的政府，但是我们在这个所有的这个无论是政治谈判也好，还是在经济贸易上面也好，老是太用一个善意的方法去做，没有一个真正的把它作为一个对手去交流、去交换。所以在这个过程中，包括我之前来英国我讲的，他是利用了民主社会更多的利益，而丧失了无论是香港也好，英国也好，在这个交易过程中丧失了很多。所以不是，我就说这个问题，刚才因为正好是讲到了这个
直接
就是说在这个过程当中，首先是要端着这个明确，我是在跟谁交易，我是在跟谁跟交谈，这才能够最后你去跟他去交流，否则的话你更多的利益是被动的，因为无论是香港的市场也好，就像刚才的国安法所讲，我在香港的时候我就跟很多大律师我也在讲。
行了，我明白你的意思。I think the gentleman wanted to ask, in his view, it's important to know that you are dealing with China, the mainland, and the important thing to consider is you need to, if you want to have the result more agreeable to you as a negotiator, it's important to show your sincerity and respect for the Chinese way of doing things and things like that. No.
Is that a question?
Well, in that case, I better not to do the translation. If you want to ask, try to use it in English. Okay, I'm sorry about that.
It's not a question.
That's a comment. It's a comment. I'm not saying a question. But he probably would like to see what the response from Paul about that comment. That would be my understanding of his.
Let me try.
Try to make it brief. Okay.
I try my best.
Yeah. Please.
I think his view is that when you negotiate or the counterparty dealing something with the counterparty, if you recognize that that is an evil party or
Surreptitious.
and you will not use like a completed kindness or polite way to do that. You have some caution or precaution that otherwise that the counterparty will take advantage of your kindness and take advantage of that your like a civilization to erode your own benefit. I think
That's the opposite then. That's
Okay.
well,
It's a long winding thing, you know.
Listen, other people may have questions, so I'll try to be brief on this. How negotiations are to be conducted. is a huge subject, and you know, I hope Britain still has very good diplomats who are good at negotiating. How one handles a negotiation, there are books written about it, you know. There are two very widely used books called, I think, How to Get Away from No and How to Get to Yes. I mean, I think that's a bit outside the subject of the talk, but obviously what applies generally to how to negotiate applies to when Britain and China negotiate.
Okay, all right, let's move on. Yes, please.
There have been many reports and much research saying that dictatorships, including China, have exercised transnational repression in the world to strengthen their rule. Okay? And we even found reports in Canada, United States, and United Kingdom as well to that effect. And in Canada, recently the Prime Minister tried to introduce a law to control these so-called foreign agents working on behalf of these dictatorships. And he also tried to criminalize some of their activities, okay, again, done by those agents. So my question is, in your opinion, is there any necessity, feasibility, and desirability of implementing a similar law in the UK?
Okay.
I haven't studied it in detail, and I don't know what whether the existing laws cover everything. Obviously, certain things like spying are illegal now. In principle, I very much dislike the work of such foreign agents, and if the existing law has inadequacies, then I would like to see it amended to stop that. But very often the problem is not with the existence of a law, the problem is with actually enforcing it. And so I would want to look closely about whether we're doing enough under existing law to take effective action. And what I said in my talk about the universities and the Confucius Institutes really relates to that. So that's my general thinking on that.
Yes.
Thank you, Paul. You mentioned something about like connecting our political request regarding rule of law in Hong Kong with something like China-Britain trade deal, that kind of thing. Sounds incredibly like what the US is trying to do over the past two administrations. My question is, what then do you expect, even if we use like trade to deal with China, what do you expect to get out of China, get out of Hong Kong? For example, is it the release of Jimmy Lai or the 47 pro-democracy legislators? And how realistic is that, given that Starmer explicitly told you that he's not really caring about Hong Kong anymore?
Well, two answers. First of all, I'm not going to talk about specifics because I'm very conscious that if I name the names of any individuals, it may actually do them harm.
Yeah.
If they're said to be linked to me, this could actually damage the people I want to help. So nothing specific. But obviously I do think that it would be a worthwhile goal if people who are in prison simply for exercising democratic rights are released. That would seem to me a very good outcome, and an achievement. And I would say that it's good in itself. As to going on further, I don't know how it would get much harder if you got to something like insisting that the national security law is amended. It seems to me that is a legitimate thing to ask, because the provisions I've outlined seem to break, but they do break, the joint declaration. But obviously that's a bigger thing for China to do, to actually convene the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress and actually pass amendments. It's a much bigger thing than just letting some individuals out of prison. But certainly, I would like to see that happen.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Paul, for your great inspiration speech. So, we just came to London for a year. And the reason why is we always think that the law won't be, the new law established they won't catch people that they are guilty before. And just follow up my daughter's question, if one country, two systems work in London, in United Kingdom, how does the common value so different that, you know, a new law established, because in Hong Kong history we don't have a new law like that established, like national security law established, and then, you know, everyone guilty before they would get caught. So how does the common value can be together?
Well, several things. Officially, technically, the national security law is not retrospective. It does not actually criminalise acts before it was enacted. But of course, the government get round this by saying those acts are evidence.
That's the point.
So it has eroded that principle. The national security law is a massive erosion of one country, two systems. It is bringing some mainland concepts into the law. It is taking away some traditional Hong Kong safeguards. The provisions that I specifically referred to, in my view, should not have happened under the basic law, under the joint declaration. So I agree with you, as I understand your question. It's not compatible. What there is now in Hong Kong, there is still two systems, but in one large area, the Hong Kong system has been eroded or overruled. People, people do say to me, well, are there still two systems? And the honest answer is yes, there are. I mean, Hong Kong has different money, it still has the common law, and most of the cases are not sensitive or controversial. Many, many other things are different. So it's an erosion, but it's not an end of the two systems.
Thank you. Yeah? Any further questions? If not, then go back to that gentleman.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned about foreign judges. I wonder if those Court of Final Appeal foreign judges will serve the same purpose if they are judges from, let's say, Sri Lanka or Pakistan or Malaysia. If they will serve the same purpose as they currently do for Australia and Canada judges, then should they be going? If not, then why?
Well, I think we must not be prejudiced. I have watched some important court cases in Malaysia when I was a trial observer. There are some very good judges in Malaysia, some really first-rate lawyers who would be appropriate. And I think it would be a good idea. It would be an interesting idea, and I think it would turn out to be a good one if there were judges from other common law jurisdictions. I don't know enough about Sri Lanka. I think of the ones you mentioned, the only one I know something of is Malaysia, and I would be quite pleased to see a Malaysian judge appointed.
Thank you. Yes.
If I may bring in British politics, I was wondering why did you join the Liberal Democrats and how does that relate to your views on Hong Kong, and is that how did...
Sure. I joined the Liberal Democrats as a teenager. They were called the Liberals in those days, but it's the same party. And the way it happened was that I was, I think, just 14, and I got three leaflets came through the door of my parents' house. Conservative, boring and pointless.
Yeah.
Labour, some good things, but some rubbish. Liberal, this is very sensible stuff. And really, maybe I'm a bit unimaginative, but I've never changed my view. I joined it, I think what really attracted me was the opposition to racism. England was a much more racist place in those days. And the Liberal Party was the one party that had a very strong record of fighting racism. David Steele, who was the leader in the 1970s, it was his personal thing. And so that was what brought me in, and that's been a big thing in my life. I've worked with people of every possible ethnicity in my life. I was married for many, many years to a Hong Konger. Our son, who's an adopted son, is ethnically Asian. And my family is Jewish, so, you know, well aware of the evils of racism. And I think that's been something of a driving force for me. I hate racism wherever I find it. And the Liberal Democrats are very good that way. So I continue supporting them. I always try to be rational and fair-minded, and I, you know, see plenty of good in things that politicians do from other parties. But that's why my heart's with the Lib Dems.
Thank you. Well, talking about the Liberal Democrats, I'm not doing party political things. Just give you a piece of factual information. I learned about the Liberal Party in the UK when I listened to the parliamentary debate when the joint declaration was drafted. Before they adopted, they had a parliamentary debate in the UK, the House of Commons. I was in Hong Kong then. I listened live to Radio Television Hong Kong's broadcast of the debate. And the only MP, and his name I remember till this day, who stood up and spoke for Hong Kong in a very steadfast manner was Paddy Ashton. And I learned that, oh, he belonged to the Liberal Party. And that stuck into my mind. And subsequently, when I came to this country, working for the BBC, going to the party conference, then I found that they consistently, in the Hong Kong context, pay far more attention to Hong Kong than the other major parties. But, well, mind you, I only give you a piece of factual thing. This is not party political, okay?
I'm embarrassed that I didn't mention Paddy Ashdown, who I work with and who I immensely admire, and you're absolutely right. Paddy Ashdown actually came to Hong Kong in 1989 and joined the demonstration in protest at the Beijing massacre. And so that's a tradition in the Liberal Democrats, which I will try to keep alive as much as I can.
Okay, let's move forward. We still have some time. Any other comments or questions, please? Any other questions? Yes, please.
I just want to know what is your food for thought of Hong Kong now? So for us who came from Hong Kong, what do we need to think about that place?
Well, let me
either in the legal sense or in the common sense.
Well, I'm very sad about what has happened over the last few years. I thought Hong Kong had quite a good system. It didn't have full democracy, but it did have political parties. It had a largely democratically elected legislature, although not completely. It had a very lively, free media. It had universities that did research into everything, and this has been destroyed. And this is all bad. I can't think of anything good that one can say about it. So, my number one feeling is sadness. It's personal to me. It was my second home. I can't go there anymore. But it's also, you know, it affects everyone. I think probably most people in this room are affected in that way. I talked a bit about the future, and what my thoughts there are, we just can't tell what the future holds. I don't see a great deal of chance for improvement unless there's a change of attitude in Beijing. so I fear that we won't see any recovery soon, but clearly there must be a chance that there will be a recovery at some point. I see someone shaking their head, but I remember in 1989, I went on a trip to Berlin, which at that time was a divided city with a wall. This was October 1989, and I said to my mother, I'm taking a quick trip to Berlin, I'd like to see it while the wall's still there. And she said, oh, you don't need to hurry to do that. The wall's going to be there for a long time. So, you know, when change comes, it can come very suddenly. So let us not be totally downhearted.
Thank you. Yeah? Yes, please.
Yes, I want to go back to the issue of one country, two systems. You said that it was only eroded, but not eliminated.
Yes.
But according to my understanding, I was a college student when UK talked with China about the return of Hong Kong to China. And according to my understanding at the time, I would say that one country, two system is a guarantee to the way of life, not only just confined to jurisdiction. Now we know that there are some pieces of law eroding the judicial independence in Hong Kong, but the effect is far-reaching. We are no longer having a free press. People in Hong Kong are now living under constant threat from officials, not only from Beijing, but even officials from Hong Kong. So I think to this sense, I would say that one country, two system, according to our understanding, is really not existing in Hong Kong anymore. Even though in many cases, there are some cases, petty crime, that kind of things, is still sentenced according to the original law in Hong Kong. But the overall environment in Hong Kong is no longer the same, or even worse than when I was a child. That's my reaction to your judgment that one country system is only eroding. I would think that it's dying down already.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Well, the points you make are very fair points. And when I say that the Sino-British Joint Declaration is being broken, I'm really agreeing with you. It was intended to guarantee a way of life. And it's not working properly now.
Yeah.
But if you say that two systems doesn't exist, this has all sorts of very far-reaching consequences. It means that, you know, you then get the question, well, should countries still recognise a Hong Kong SAR passport?
Yeah.
I don't think that would be in Hong Kong people's interest generally. That passport was no longer recognised because two systems weren't recognised. So I would, for that reason, I would not go as far as saying that.
Thank you. Yeah, the lady over there. Yeah.
I appreciate your attitude towards the British political system or party systems, right? Because you, from your talk, right, you mentioned about that you disagree with the Labour Party's right point of view, right, on Sino-British declaration. You think that the government or the leading party, right, in the UK should raise the questions, right? Continue to raise.
Well, not quite. What I said,
okay. Yeah, please. I will finish, right? And then you also, right, disagree that, right, Boris Johnson's, right, point of view, giving Hong Kongers, right, having the right of the vote, right, in the UK, right? I think I agree with you, right, that this is good. But on the other hand, you are now already in the UK. You are a member of the Lib Dem, and as far as I know, that you also represent Lib Dem to run the elections, right? So my question is that, right, in the future, since you no longer go back like us, right, you cannot go back to Hong Kong. So I would like to know more about what is your plan, right? While in the UK,
Well, right, okay. Just one minor correction. I didn't say anything about the Labour government. I had a personal conversation with Keir Starmer when he was the leader of the opposition. And I don't yet know what the Labour government is going to do in relation to Hong Kong. I hope that something will be done. My personal plans, I'm quite old, so I'm not, planning to embark on a major political career. I've stood twice for Parliament. Until very recently, standing as a Liberal Democrat was just something you could do as a little hobby because you were not going to get elected. But this has now changed, but it's mainly going to be a new generation taking that forward. I will continue to do things to help Hong Kong when I think I can be effective. And I thought very hard before coming here today. For a while after I came back, I did nothing. This was a deliberate choice. There were people close to me in Hong Kong who I wanted to protect. That situation has changed. And so I think it is worthwhile if I speak out. I hope that what I've said today is useful and other people will, take some of the ideas away and maybe work with them. So I'll continue to do that as the occasion arises, but always remember when I'm talking that I'm subject to some very severe constraints in what I can say. Because I've been so demonized in such an unfair and outrageous way, it could damage someone simply to be known to be a friend of mine. And on top of that, there may be people who've done very helpful things in the past, but I can't talk about it. It's talking about it will get them into trouble. So I have to limit it a bit, talk in general terms, but I do plan to continue to do so.
That's good.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Paul, for the discussion. I wonder if you have any views about those several thousand youngsters, perhaps as old as Gemini. What will happen to them? Because still about 7,000 people have not yet been prosecuted, and they're just staying there. Now, if I follow the common law system, they need to be released sooner or later. But
these are people who are in prison.
Arrested. No charges.
What's the charge? What's the term? They're not yet in prison. They're not yet prosecuted, but they're kept somewhere in those.
Oh, you mean they're waiting for trial?
Yeah, waiting for trial, but not yet released. Not yet released.
How many? Let him speak, okay? Please.
They're staying somewhere, prison, I don't know.
Custody.
But now, under the common law system, you need to release them 21 days if they can't be prosecuted, right? But under the new system, they didn't specify a period for putting them there waiting to be tried. Now, what would be?
They are in detention or on bail?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
Well, if you are talking about thousands, they were being arrested, but they were not charged. Yes, that would be the situation. Okay, let Paul respond.
What will happen to them? That is what, because in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I've got your point, I think. Look, what normally happens, except for the most serious offences, is people are charged, but they are not locked up at that point. They are normally granted bail. They have to report to the police from time to time. And most of the 7,000 people you are talking about are in that position. Now, for most of them are charged with riot. That's the biggest offence. There's no limitation period for that offence. For serious offences in English common law, there isn't a limitation period. Some American states have limitation periods, which often turn out to be a very bad thing, because serious crimes sometimes come to light years after they were committed. But the fact is that those people will be at risk of being charged with riot indefinitely. In England, if the police decide not to prosecute someone, they normally send them a very carefully worded letter to the effect, we are going to take no further action against you at this time. You know, the papers will be left on the file. So that means if new evidence comes to light later, they may still charge you.
Yeah.
Now, whether they are really going to prosecute every person, this is obviously a decision for the prosecutors in Hong Kong. I don't know what they will do. My personal view is that it is harsh and oppressive to prosecute someone many years later when their alleged involvement was very minor. Someone who was present at the scene but did nothing more. It seems to me that to prosecute them many years later is unjust. But that's just my view. When it comes to what power does the Hong Kong government have, they do, even under the common law, without the national security law, riot of course is just a common law offence, they would have power to charge someone as far into the future as they want. You could get a point at which a judge says, this is an abuse, this is oppressive, it is so long ago, witnesses can't remember, there's no possibility of a fair trial. But unless you reach that point, the trials can go on. That's the answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further questions?
Can I just follow up on that one?
Okay, all right, okay.
On that question and comment, what would you say about the members who are trustees of the 612 Humanitarian Foundation?
I never saw anything to suggest that that foundation was doing anything wrong, and I found it deeply offensive to see Cardinal Zen, a man of 90, being arrested on what seemed, even if true, to be something quite trivial. So those are really my thoughts on that.
Okay, we still can take 2 or 3 more questions if you yes.
Hi, nice to listen to your talk, and I have a question. After the general election, the Liberal Democrats has increased the number of MPs. Do you think there would be a group specialized in Hong Kong issue and agenda, so that there will be a bigger voice in the Parliament to speak for Hong Kong?
Well, I would like that to happen, and if the opportunity arises, I will try to push for that. The new Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats is a newly elected MP called Callum Miller. I've heard him speak 3 times. He's extremely impressive, one of the best of the new intake of Liberal Democrat MPs. So I would be cautiously confident that there will be some good policy decisions taken. And I will certainly, this is where I think I do have a role, I will try to make sure that Hong Kong is prominent in Liberal Democrat foreign policy.